Hello and welcome, Sheriff here. It's now 2 years that I'm playing air combat simulations, and with more and more time which went by, I knew that this is what I want to play for the time to come. Naturally, I got interested in better and additional hardware. I started off with a very cheap joystick, the Dslyecxi of Thrustmaster, and for looking around I just used my head switch. That was totally fine for the beginning and of course for War Thunder. However, I bought relatively quickly a Track IR to get a more immersive experience, but that was basically it for quite some time. I was playing for almost 1.5 years with that exact config. Once or twice I got interested in rudder pedals, however, but mainly I was not satisfied with the options I had available. The rudder pedals from typical brands like Logitech, Dslyecxi and Thrustmaster cost between 100 and 150 euros. And they are not only expensive, but they look like plastic and they look relatively fragile. Basically the same stuff the joysticks are made of. Yeah, with rudder pedals there's that thing that you are stomping with your feet on them for hours. And maybe, at least in my case, with more force than necessary. Yeah, that's at least what I do in tight situations, for example, to get that snapshot or to keep the plane while taking off on track. So basically I was afraid that I spent 150 euros for a piece of plastic which I destroy within maybe 1 year and with a negligible impact on my actual flying experience. Time went by and I switched to Battle of Stalingrad, a game where rudder is more important and more sensitive. And I was not satisfied with my accuracy and I was annoyed by my accidental rudder jerks. So I was checking again the rudder pedal market, and then there was that other manufacturer for rudder pedals called MFG, so nothing of the classic brands. And everything I was reading about the pedal was, oh my god, they are the best, buy them. But looking at the price, I was a little shocked. They cost, depending where you live, around 250 and 320 euros in the basic configuration, so around twice as much in comparison to the other solutions. So I waited even longer, and after a while I just wrote the manufacturer an email explaining that I'm a YouTuber and I'm interested in a review, if he can send out some test samples. He answered that he couldn't do that, as he basically manufactures one sample for each order he gets, but what he can do is that he can give me some % off, and that of course I could still review if I wanted to. And after a while I agreed, and after testing now the pedals for 3 months, I really want to do that review because the pedals deserve that. So here's my full disclosure. I've paid for the pedals, but I got 15% off and I got some extra equipment with it. But later more about the extra equipment. But if you have now at that point any doubt about my credibility, feel free to leave the video now, but if you read and watch other reviews, you will see there are similar opinions on this product. In this video I will show mostly in-game footage, but I will use some pictures to show how they look and what I'm talking about. But if you want to know how you use the pedals directly or how you assemble them, I'll link some videos in the description where they are shown in action. Anyway, let's get started. If you purchase the pedals, the first thing you have to do is to wait, because the MFG Crosswinds don't come from a big company, like I said. Basically they come from a one-man army. Milan, that's the guy who owns MFG, has to do all the stuff himself. He answers your mails, he processes the orders, and he's manufacturing the pedals. And after a few weeks, you have a surprise at your front door. The pedals come in a small package, tightly packed. And if you wouldn't be prepared, the first surprise awaits you here. The pedals aren't made out of simple plastic, and I think they are made of carbon fiber. Relatively light, but very, very sturdy. And after unpacking, you don't have to assemble a lot. Basically, the base is already assembled. You have to assemble the pedals to the base system. But that is done in seconds, as they are to be fixed with a hex key. Then you have to place the spring, which brings the pedals back into the center position as soon as you release the pressure of the pedals. And with this spring comes the first possibility to customize your pedals. First, you can tighten up the spring with a screw as hard as you want. The harder you set up the spring, the faster the pedals will snap back into center position after releasing pressure. And of course, you need more pressure to get more deflection. Secondly, you can attach the spring to two different notches at the base. If you select the outer notch, you need less force to move the pedals, and if you attach it to the inner notch, surprise surprise, you need now more pressure to move the pedals. But what I really want to emphasize on here is that you can adjust the pedals in many ways. Additionally to the customizable pressure for moving the pedals, you can change the angle the pedals are set up. You can change the force needed to use the toe brakes. You can swap the pedals to the side if you want. And the pedals come with some adjustable wall spacers, so you can choose how much space you want between the wall and your pedals. Alternatively, you can use those spacers to fix the pedals to the ground or something else. But most important, and I think that is basically the soul and the heart of the pedals, you can change the so-called CAM or cam profile over which the centering bearing is running. This profile defines how the rudder movement feels. You can use two different profiles, and you can purchase one additional profile if you want to do so. Basically, every profile is for a different playstyle. One profile has a distinct center position, so a relatively steep curve. The pedals want to center themselves pretty aggressively, and you can feel the center point very good. Then you have a very shallow profile where you can deflect the pedals with ease and where you can hold a high deflection very easily. And then there's a third one with some other features. I just experimented around with all three, and I picked the CAM or Cam Profile 6 after a while, finding them the most suitable for propeller-driven aircraft, as they have a very noticeable center point. When you purchase the pedals, you have the option first to add another cam profile, the cam profile number 5, and you can order some additional plates to customize the spacing between those pedals. Basically, you can have the pedals now more narrow together, but you can space them even further out, so your pedals are even more customizable. If you ask me if you need that, I don't know. I personally just use the standard configuration first for the spacing of the pedals, but I use as well a cam profile which is in the standard package anyway, so I personally wouldn't need the additional parts. The Crosswinds don't come with software, but you can and you should download the software from the official webpage. With that software you can calibrate your pedals and you can define dead zones and other typical stuff. It's really easy to handle, and sometimes I just check if my pedals are still properly calibrated, but for the most part I did not see any reason to recalibrate my pedals. Once set up, the pedals are rock solid. I had to recalibrate once after I changed the cam profile, but that was it. For the assembly and the software, the manufacturer has created some videos, and there are some other videos on YouTube, so you should have no problem with calibrating to assemble those stuff. Really easy. But now let's get to my first impressions I had in-game and in-flight as soon as I switched from my twist joystick to the Crosswinds. First, I have to say that the Crosswinds are recognized by every game I tested so far, and I tested Battle of Stalingrad, of course, I tested DCS, and I tested War Thunder. My first actual flying impression I had was maybe different, as you might expect from my praising in the last couple of minutes. I was kinda overwhelmed, I have to say. To remind you, this was the first time I wasn't using my twist function of the joystick, and I had now to control the aircraft basically with my entire body. Left hand on my throttle, right hand on my joystick, and my feet on the pedals. Steering the aircraft on the ground with the toe brakes and standing on the right rudder while taking off in a 109, which is, and I repeat, kinda overwhelming. It's very similar to driving a car for the first time. I need a couple of days to make myself familiar with the new hardware, and to be honest, I missed a little bit to sit very lazy in front of my PC, and flying was now more work for me. That feeling, however, vanished over the time, and I noticed how the usage of good pedals affected my flying in a very pleasant way. With a twist joystick you always have some unwanted movement of the rudder if you want to move the ailerons or vice versa. Rolling scissors or just barrel rolls are now way easier to fly. You just give a little rudder and you roll your plane. Additionally, you can feel the plane a little bit better while taxiing, taking off and landing. Don't get me wrong, all that stuff wasn't really hard to do with a twist. However, the precision with that you can do all the stuff is with the Crosswinds in no way comparable to the twist joystick. And if you look closely to my latest videos, you noticed way more defensive flying and me surviving it. And again, this isn't exclusively thanks to the pedals, but they made it a bit easier. Another thing is that now my aiming is not affected any longer by me accidentally twisting my joystick in maneuvers, and I'm hitting targets a little bit more consistently. The pedals themselves are feeling light, easy to handle and absolutely natural. You exactly know how much pressure you need to get the rudder to a certain deflection. The transition from left to right rudder or the usage of toe brakes are super smooth and are hard to describe. It feels just right, I have to say. And do you remember that I was afraid that I could damage my pedals in gritty maneuvers if the pedals aren't sturdy enough? With the Crosswinds there's really no reason to be worried. They are super sturdy, there's no plastic which can break, there's no sensor which can lose sensitivity because the sensors are working magnetic and not mechanical, and even stomping around on those pedals don't impress the material very much. From my own experience I can say dust and dog hairs are not a big problem. All parts are accessible, and I had it once that the spring of the toe brakes was a little bit squeaking all the time. So I just got some lubricant out of my garage and the problem was solved. So, now I praised the pedals for the last couple of minutes. Are there any downsides? Answer is, not a damn lot, but the price is very steep, to be honest. Around 300 euros is nothing what most of us can spend on secondary hardware. I don't think that the additional parts I mentioned earlier are worth the money. Maybe there are some guys around who just waited exactly for the possibility to change the space between the pedals, or they just waited to install the cam profile number 5. For most players, however, I think that the basic pedals are fine and that you don't need the additional stuff. But maybe that was the plan of Milan, that he didn't want to put those additional parts into the basic package. Yeah, first to avoid making the pedals more expensive than necessary, but secondly he wanted to provide some parts for players who want to customize the pedals even more. If that is the case, that's fine, but yeah, the extra parts cost 30 euros extra on the already expensive pedals, and for most players it's not really worth it. But other than that, the pedals are really awesome. I don't hesitate to say that the pedals are the best and the most reliable hardware I have on my PC, and they led to a more immersive flight experience. So, who should buy the MFG Crosswinds? Players who are flying flight sims now for quite a while, and players who can imagine to do that for the next 5 to 10 years. Players who have the money or don't want to spend more money on plastic stuff of the already famous brands. Players who are ready to spend a little bit more money for quality and who are searching for the next step after having cheaper pedals or having now a twist for ages. And last but not least, the pedals are for girlfriends who want to gift their boyfriends those pedals, because that shows that they are absolutely wife material. But joking aside, who should not buy the pedals? Players who are starting off with flight sims and are so sure that those pedals will make them better in no time. Then additionally players who spend their money better on a new graphics card or a new screen. Basically players where an upgrade of the primary hardware is in order. I really want to emphasize that the pedals are really good hardware, and that 300 euros is relatively cheap what you get. However, we are talking about secondary hardware, so secondary hardware means that you don't really need this. You can do all the stuff with your twist, you can do all the stuff with cheaper pedals. However, you spend a little bit more money and you get much more quality out of it in this case here. I really can recommend to watch other reviews to read more about it, and if you have the money and you like flight sims a lot, goddamn, get those pedals, they are great. I hope you liked my little review. That was my first hardware review. I really tried and I hope to get more negative points about the pedal, but at this point I really don't have more negative points. It's the price which is the biggest negative point, and if I find more in the future I will tell you in my videos or on my Twitter account or my Facebook account. But at the point I don't have more negative points. I really enjoy my pedals a lot. But that's it for today. I hope you liked it. See you next time. Bye bye.